Alrighty, I'm gonna try to. I'm gonna try to do this really quick. Um, I've been watching some videos that I've been watching some videos that have been trending lately. Um, so I want to talk about it really quick because a lot of these videos that are trending is really nothing. I hate to be kind of what's the condescending about it, but what everyone's griping about the music and the music being broke and all that, and artists are broke. Let me tell you, artists have always been broke because 90% of the time, and this game has been going on since the 50s. Okay, it's been happening to. It started with all the way back to the 50s where you had high selling artists like Nat King Cole, um, Sam Cooke. Um, I'm just gonna, just artists even back in those days where labels were stealing. Well, I ain't gonna say stealing. Um, even Jackie Wilson. I'm just gonna name big name artists. Um, so artists have always had to tour from concert touring to make their money because artists have always signed these deals that where they're going to own publishing and not 80% of sales. Their justification for this, and because a record label was always in the business of selling records, they can't sell records, which is property. It's just music property. You create music, it becomes music property because it's a tangible thing that people can get themselves a hold of. So their object is to make money on that to fund their lifestyle. So basically, you're an artist doing all the work to make labels money. Period. And artists that become really successful at entertaining to broaden their audience, the better they are as an entertainer. Because an artist the most successful artists are entertainers. They're not just simply recording artists. They become very, very boring. A very boring artist, if they can, a lot of people they're impressed, and they'll develop a following. And I'll talk about like ballad singers like Luther Vandross or Freddie Jackson. Artists like that could always, because they're talented vocalists. But biggest artists do more than that. I'm talking about artists that not only do they sing, they dance and they entertain and bring all this energy on the stage. And I'm talking about going with, not just Jackie Wilson, but uh, um, um, when it came to James Brown, Michael Jackson, his sister Janet Jackson, Paula Abdul, when she's dancing, or any artist, and a lot of artists realize we got to start developing dance routines and choreography and all this to really entertain. Um, and then there are artists that there may not be very good dancers themselves, but they surround themselves around dancers. They get some of the best dancers to help them entertain the show. And I'll use like Mary J. Blige or Mariah Carey. Because Mariah Carey doesn't dance; she just stands there and sings. But she gets a lot of choreographers around her to. If not, most people will be like, So to try to make it, the artists have always had to tour because the record labels would always sign. Now, here's the thing that most people when they sign record contracts, when most people sign a record contract, they do not know that they sign a contract on a purpose that what the record labels know that an unknown artist do not know is that they're giving up legal rights to their own music property. Period. Our record labels know that. That's why they sign have you sign. It's about copyright, which gives you its rights. You sign up your right, and we will turn around and give you a percentage that's called percentage points. Point or percentages of the sales. A point percentage. 3%, 3 points, 6 points, or whatever. The more you can make the label money, the more you can negotiate to get a higher point. The average amount of point, 1 point was about 1 point, based on the law portion. 1 point had to be at least 8.1 cents. So if you got a 3-point deal, we're going to pay you 24.3 cents of the total amount of sales. So if you sold a CD or whatever, or whatever, it could be whatever the case, it's 3% of the total value of the property. So if it's 99 cents, well, you got 3% of 99 cents, which is technically about 2.4 cents of that. So you got, out of the 99 cents, you got two pennies of that. So if it was a $99.99 CD, which had by maybe 10, 12 tracks on it, you'll get 24.3 cents of that. And how they did it was the artists is the ones that had to pay producers and music lawyers and road managers and everything else, all that, and all the recoupable stuff, advances, touring support. They had to pay all that back to the label. That's the reason why that little 24 cents per unit, per CD, per unit, they pretty much, that they never made enough off a sale of something to pay back the label. What's this thing? Google Chrome. What is this? What is this? Google Chrome. Let me close this out. Okay. So anyhow, so artists have always been broke if they can't sell concert, especially if they can meet, if the most artists will not meet megastar status, because a lot of artists just don't have the Michael Jackson, James Brown charisma, the Janet Jackson thing or whatever. And then there used to be a time where labels would do everything, with artist development and everything else. But you can thank downloading and everything else that everyone wants everything for free. But the thing is, most artists were never making any of that kind of money that the labels were making. So the people behind the scenes were the ones making the record label's the one getting, like the CEO. I'm just gonna make up a label. Let's say it's called World Star Records. The CEO might have an agreement that his percentage, his pay cut is about 45% of all record sales. That's what the CEO or the record owner is getting of sales. So if you do some math, he's got a 45 point deal because he's the record, he owns the label. He can set his price to whatever he wants. But then the record label still has to pay staff, because there was quite a bit of people. You can't have an LLC or any type of company and not be able to pay staff. You have to pay your staff. So a good percentage of the sales would go toward paying staff. So that's why they would justify paying artists so little, because they had to pay the record executive, the CEO or the record owner is getting, he's getting dang near almost half of the profits. And then another 20%, and then they use the other percentage for the excuse of manufacturer cost, distribution, and all this other stuff. Anyhow, to make a long story short, this is the reason why you would see videos recording artists and all this are being broke. The same thing with when TLC got up there and accepted their awards and say, we sold 10 million copies, blah, 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 and we worked hard in the business and all that, but we're broke. And people, it's easy to get everyone gets fooled with the accolades. of the business. Everyone gets fooled with the accolades. They think the accolades is what are reason why artists are rich, because of accolades. And accolades what I mean by accolades would be all the showboat stuff, the nice cars, living in the nice rented mansions, or whatever the case, all of the nice clothes, jewelry. They see artists going to all these, they do these red carpet shows or all these paparazzi spotlight places where they're going to fancy hotels, nice restaurants, traveling in private jets maybe, or whatever the case. They see artists going to Grammy or American Music Awards show or BET Award shows, Soul Train Awards. They see artists winning all these awards. They see all these gold and platinum albums on the wall, Grammys on the shelf, awards on the shelves. But the thing is, the gold and plat awards that are on the wall, and the Grammys and American Music Awards and the BET and MTV Awards and all that stuff is on the shelf, are not bringing any revenue to the artist. They bring absolutely nothing. That's just award. It's just a credit. They get that, and it's a nice achievement to say, I got a Grammy or American Music Award, and it sits on the shelf, but it's not bringing any money. I would bring more money buying an audio interface and recording clients, because our clients are paying, than having a Grammy on the shelf. The Grammy might get you the clients, but if you're into recording, then the gear is what's going to help you make the money when you're dealing with buying clients. But as an artist point of view, this is the reason why you can see an artist like Dawn Robinson, which I would love to help her because she's homeless. Because she's an amazing talent. She doesn't deserve to be homeless, but she's a victim of the rest of people don't know who Dawn Robinson is. Dawn Robinson is one of the members of En Vogue. She doesn't deserve to be homeless, but she's one of millions of artists that fell into the same trap that we all see it. And we all see it. You'll see artists, we all seen them. You see the artists, and you would see the lifestyles of the rich and famous or whatever, and you would see artists, celebrities or whatever. It's the same, an artist can go broke just like as fast as like a ball player. But to make a long story short, or to not to make this long, but the artist, everyone gets fooled with the accolades, the fancy cars, the clothes and all that, not realizing that the accolades, some of that stuff is an illusion. Sometimes the labels are making the artist appear like, whatever the case. Yes, you'll have a Porsche that the record label owns the Porsche. We'll let you as an artist drive it, but we still own the car. We'll let you even use some of these cars for your video. Yeah, we got some Lamborghinis and Rolls Royce and all that, and the artists can act and make it appear like they own the cars when they really don't. The real, it's like when they were doing MTV Cribs, and they were going to all these celebrities that, try to make them look like living in these big gigantic mansions and or whatever. When everyone found out, that's why MTV Cribs they found out it was a facade. Like people don't like when the people hate that. That's why what's happening now is everyone making all these videos about artists being broke, because it's all being revealed, because everyone thought that, and I'm talking about even newer rappers and singers and artists and bands, that everyone thought that if they get on a record deal, record label and all that, and they get all the success, and maybe they get some charting on the Billboard and all this, they thought that they getting accolades like a nice car, big mansion, they thought that's the dream life. I'm going to become this big, rich, famous celebrity. Not realizing they don't know how no one ever learns. People thought getting to this business to become rich and famous by fantasizing the accolades. Accolades would be a nice car, big house, winning Grammys, whatever the case, winning gold and platinum albums. They thought the accolades, and no one was focused on the money, how the business side worked. Most artists did not know how it worked. They don't know how publishing worked. They didn't know that when you sign contracts, they're signing their rights away. I got a record deal. Not know you signed an obligated contract. This is what you did. If you signed it, just like when they all these artists about, well, what record labels were doing, it's really a glorified loan. I would say, and that is probably the most accurate depiction, but here's the bad part. It's not only is it just a glorified loan, it's a glorified like a student loan, like a loan deal that where you can't get out of it unless you pay it back. It's a contracted loan. It's like, how you have a secure loan versus an unsecured loan. When you sign a record deal, you sign a secured loan. When you sign a contract and they sign all that, that's why they say most artists did not know that when everything that they're recording in a recording studio, it's like a work for hire. They're working for the label. So the label can make money. The label, business is business. It's like working for a job. Yeah, I'll make you all these different positions within a job. But overall, whether you're selling or whether, most businesses are either a service business or a selling business. They serve merchandise, tangible goods. Well, the record label were selling tangible goods, meaning CDs, records. That's why all you had at record stores, which were basically small distributors. They distribute to the public. And so you had to do all this other stuff like promotional, which means you had to do all these advertisement and you also publicity promotion. And also the biggest helper to getting artists to be noticed so that the record labels can sell their records is to have assigned artists that are on radio, make music videos. The game, this is way too long in this video to explain it, but what's going on now and everyone, I saw one guy, the rapper, broke down to he got an EBT card and, basically he's broke. Thinking that if he's going to get into the music business, like 99% people think they get music, everyone think they're going to become rich. And they don't know how the music industry works. The number one factor to any big artist to become as big as they are is an audience, a fan base audience. Period. If you don't have a fan base audience and keep growing audience, you're not going to have people that's going to buy the merchandise from that artist. You have to build an audience. How they did in the old school way was you would sign an artist, like the Jackson 5s or whatever, and they would grow an audience. They become really, really popular. The fastest way to do that is to get people to see them. What's the fastest way to get people to see them? TV. What's the fastest way to get people to see them / hear them? Radio. If I can get them on as many radio stations and as many TV appearances as possible, everyone will start becoming familiar because they're hearing them on the radio and they're seeing them on TV and they're watching them on videos. That's the fastest way to grow that. Well, millions of people learn that platform and all of a sudden they're like, well, there's only 24 hours in a day. We can only play the most popular people because radios are into making money as well. That's how they have to make money from advertisement by listening audience. Same thing with video. So they're only going to play people because if people don't listen to the radio, they play mediocre artists, people are not going to listen to the radio. They're going to turn the radio station to something else. They start hearing mediocre tunes, but mediocre artists, they're going to change the channel. They don't want to hear mediocre. They want to hear the best. People always want to hear the best artist with the best music or whatever the case all the time. So that's why you would have your popular bands, your popular artists. And what I mean the best doesn't necessarily mean the most talented. I'm talking about the most entertaining that people love. In other words, I would say, like for example, Madonna's a mediocre singer, but she had excellent production and she had a look for the 80s. So that's why she captivated. You know, it wasn't that she was just great. You know, she didn't have vocal chops like Mariah Carey. But you know, there's a lot of producers and whatever case behind the scenes that can make an artist sing with the right music. Music is powerful. A lot of times when you have the best sounding music and music production and arrangements, you do not have to be the best sounding artist. If the music's captivating. That's how some mediocre artists with an image, a look, and entertainment and all this can gravitate and get people to gravitate toward that artist, because there's a niche sound coming from the music being created as well. There's a whole bunch of factors. So I wanted to sum it up about artists. This is the reason why you still see artists that have to still tour, even in their 60s and 70s, because if they don't tour or they don't have any way to keep generating income, because their lifestyle, here's another thing that, you know, that none of us taught about. None of the people that are, when you come from a low income environment, you don't understand a lot of factors. Something that, you know, like one of the things that I've learned, and this goes for anyone that becomes a very famous, popular celebrity, is one of the things is your lifestyle is going to change. A lot of times it has to. You can't you won't get any rest or any privacy living in the hood or living in a typical neighborhood. So most artists try to live and seclude themselves for privacy purposes, and in some instances, safety purposes, because people don't know how to control themselves around celebrities. So, to make a long story short, so everyone, even if you're an ordinary person, not in the entertainment field or whatever, $100,000 home versus $1 million home, the property tax that you have to pay every year is significantly higher on $1 million home. You may pay $1,000. They say about 1 to 2% of the value of the home, whatever. $100,000 home, you may pay $1,000 a year in property tax. $1 million home, easy $10,000. You get what I'm saying? $10,000 to $20,000 in property tax. That's just the property tax. And then the maintenance, the same thing. An average $100,000 home might cost you about $3,000 a year to maintain. Now, $1 million home, we're talking $30,000 to maintain. And most of the time, most $1 million homes are in HOAs. That your typical $100,000 home may not be in an HOA. The cost of the maintenance, the lights, the water, usually the utilities are significantly higher. Average $100,000 home may only be about $300 in utilities, lights and water, gas. But it can be a month. It can be an easy $3,000 a month for a home that's, instead of a $100,000 home, which is maybe, maybe 1,500 square feet, 2,000 square foot, 1,500, when you go into a $1 million mansion, now we're going into the 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square foot range. Instead of a three bedroom home, now we're talking 5, 6, 7 bedroom. Instead of 2-car garage, now we're talking 6-car, 4, 5, 6-car. Instead of only a couple of bathrooms, now we're talking 6, 7 bathrooms. So it's the cost is significantly higher to live in a $1 million mansion. That's just a $1 million mansion compared to a $5, $6, $10 million mansion. So your cost, your income has to triple. And so that's all these factors. The same thing with the cost of cars, which are the most depreciating asset you can ever buy. But I just want to end the video on why, this is the game. So I want to say this, and probably going to talk about this when I do a live stream, is this. I'm going to go dive deep into this lifestyle because I'm like this, and I want to say this. If you are doing this only for a hobby, let's say you have no plans of doing this no more than just a hobby. I just want to make some music to, maybe play some music for my friends, whatever the case. then why would you need to go to the great extents to try to make sure your stuff sound like industry? You don't have to make your stuff sound like industry master rated distributed product, because it's a hobby. You don't plan on going professional with this. You don't plan on touring. It doesn't have to sound industry standard. Yeah, you might want to make the sound somewhat decent. Maybe I learn how to use a compressor here, maybe some EQ to make it sound pretty decent. But it's just a hobby. I don't know why anyone would, then that's the case. You don't need to spend money on top of the line amps, big name microphones, high end preamps, big giant console, top of the line studio monitors and all that. You don't, because it's a hobby. It doesn't have to sound industry standard or that great when it's a hobby. Now you're trying to go pro level, and you're trying to be the next. You're trying to make your music worth reaching. You're trying to make it where I want to, my stuff to compete with top big name artists. You don't want your stuff to be on the level like Mariah Carey or whatever the case, Janet Jackson, whatever. Then yes, by all means, because you plan on trying to reach that star level, which is another thing I'm going to talk deep dive into. Yes, I want to be able to make sure I'm using the best compressors and EQs and making my stuff sound the best, because that's my goal. It does need to be industry standard. It needs to be, whatever, radio standard or streaming standard and all that. Yes. But if it's just a hobby, then you're wasting your money for something that you're not serious about, because a hobby is something that no one is serious about. They're just a hobby, versus an enthusiast, versus someone who's actually trying to do it professionally. It's like buying a cheap, just use your cell phone to do photography, or maybe just a low-end camera versus a pro-level camera. A pro-level camera, you're actually trying to do this as, professional photography. So you can use professional cameras, pro-level stuff. That's the whole thing, same thing. So I want to wrap it up on, yes, of course artists have always, this is nothing new. I find it ironic when people are breaking down like, man, artists are broke, the music industry is over. The music industry has been broken, and artists have been broke for years. This is nothing new. It's the illusion that people would see, it's the accolades that people are still associated with artists had money, because they would see artists, and you'd be amazed how much amount of debt some people can get in. I'm talking about artists, tons of credit card debt, loan debts, and everything else, like most average people, high-end amounts of debt, so they can drive a nice car, but they're paying, whatever the case. But that's why a lot of artists that once their careers end, some artists' career, they were on top. They had the top music videos at one point, and now they're working at, as a cashier at Walmart, because they didn't realize that, everyone falls to the same victim, that once I got a record deal or whatever the case, I got a video on TV or BT or whatever, whatever the case, I made it. I'm going to be start making all this millions of dollars. Not really. No one knows. What's the best way I can describe it? No one ever knew the money portion, how it worked. Licensing, publishing, copyrights, the whole business side. I didn't know that when I was I didn't know that when no one knows that. And it's almost like we find out too late, and then we're disappointed that, they didn't realize record labels were, whatever they oh man, I'm broke. The record labels are taking all this money or whatever. And it's like this. It's always been in the contract. But it's the accolades, because we're so blinded with the accolades. Oh man, I get, I'm gonna, and everyone thinks the same way, whether they're directly affected or indirectly, which means friends and family from afar seeing their loved one or their friend or whatever, and they've seen them on TV, they're seeing them on, hearing them on the radio, they're watching them on videos. and automatically make an assumption that they must be making big kind of money, and they're making all this big money, and that they don't have no clue. Then they always see their friends and family like, man, why you borrowing money, or they broke or whatever the case. They understand. Then they can understand why all of a sudden this artist, they were in this famous group or whatever, and all of a sudden now they went back to a regular lifestyle. Some of these they left it to become they were just big in this famous girl group, and now one of the members is working as an interior decorator for a regular interior decorating company or whatever, or they're working at Walmart cashier, or they're driving a truck, or they don't understand why you had a top #1 video at one point, and then and they might have seen that because the artists at one point, whether they were successful for a year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever, and then they turn around and they see the awards. They still see the artist still has their awards. They still have their gold and platinum albums. They got their awards because the awards don't make artists any money. It's like anyone that wins an award, like I got plenty of awards in the Army. I got some Army Commendation medals and some Army Achievement medals or whatever case. Those are just awards. They don't make me any money. And a lot of times those awards mean absolutely nothing once I've left the Army. Those awards are only significant while I was on active duty. It's the same thing. It's like you can have an artist that won some gold and platinum albums, from the, let's say artists, let's say they're still living. Let's say I'll just use an artist. Let's say one of the singers from the Stylistics, they won a gold award, a gold certified or platinum award or gold award album, and it's on their wall. There's no checks. Checks don't go behind awards. But your only thing on that award is your name. So you put your name on that award and it just gets to go on your wall. It's just a eye candy. But what generates is the song. Let's say that the song was really popular, they start using it. They still use it in commercials. They still use it in videos, movies. They sample it, and whatever the case, as long as it's still being generated and used that way, even if they still play it on classic radio, whatever, and it's still being licensed to be played on radio, whatever, that's what's making the money. And the thing is, with those licenses, it's all about publishing. Whoever owns the publishing to license those songs out is the one making the money. So if these artists didn't write the songs, but the songs still generate, the people that wrote the song, songwriters, still get the money because you got all these, like the BMI and ASCAP that is tracking it. They pay the songwriters and the publishing companies. But most people don't know this. This is all part of the game that most people don't know when they sign a contract. This is why most artists don't realize when they sign a contract, they gave up their rights to their own sound recordings / master recorded copies, masters. That's the reason why you hear so many artists crying about, I don't own my masters. Yeah, because you signed a contract that says you don't get to own your masters. They didn't know that because they were, they got caught up with, we're going to give you a $350,000 or $500,000 advance. And all the artists thinking about Grammys, they were thinking red carpet treatment, big mansions, cars, Grammys, They were associating, I'm going to make big money associated with all that. They didn't realize, no, those are two separate things. But the regulator was like, as long as you are selling us 1 million copies, we'll give you a 3.3% of that. But that 3% you need to pay, all advance and all that stuff that's recoupable. If that's paid back, then yeah, you get to keep your little 3%. This is where, and most artists will never ever get to a status where they got to the point where they can make money off the sales like the record labels were. But this is why most record labels have went into downfall, because people aren't buying records anymore. Everyone's downloading and streaming. So that's it for the video. So the music industry is a very brutal game, and that's just the business side. We didn't talk about the dark side of drugs and everything else that and what can get you caught up. And that part of the music, it's a big thing that most people are not aware Other than that, that's going to do it for this video. Y'all have a good one.